Really happy to have you today and happy to have you coming back week after week for these sessions. We're happy to share what we know and all about science communication. And today's session will be about how to craft an elevator pitch. So on the agenda for today, what is an elevator pitch? Why do you need one? And where should you start? And just a reminder again that these sessions are meant to be sort of bite-sized 15-20 minute presentations with time for Q&A at the end, because it's all about the Q&A and about answering your questions about these things. So we want to keep it really high level and really conversational and just teach you a couple of new things that can help you, that you can then implement in your own lives. Starting off with cats, of course. So let's start off with the elephant or the cat in the room. And that is that it's actually really hard to craft an elevator pitch. It's not easy. So, when somebody says, yeah, go ahead and write your elevator pitch 30 seconds long, sounds easy enough, but it's not. And, the fact is that paring your life's work down to a half a minute or so is legitimately challenging, but it's really worth it because it helps you reach out to people that you may not otherwise have access to. A great elevator pitch can also open doors to, future collaborations or potential funding opportunities. And the most important part is that it can help you talk to anyone. And it can also take the stress out of a situation when you meet somebody or you're put in a situation where you have to think on your feet and somebody, asks you about yourself and you have to come up with something quick and witty. So to have something ready actually can take the stress out of a situation and can make those opportunities a little bit more exciting than daunting. So starting off with, what is an elevator pitch? Well, first of all, it's a great icebreaker in a situation. It allows you to quickly and enthusiastically introduce yourself to somebody. It gives you an opportunity to give a quick overview or synopsis of your work. And most importantly, with an elevator pitch, you want it to be short, around 30 seconds, even shorter, 20 seconds. And you ideally want to finish with some sort of a call to action. And what I mean by that isn't necessarily that you get something directly out of the conversation, but that the conversation then leads to the next step. So, perhaps it's, can we set up a meeting? Or, I'd love to follow up with you. Or here's my card. There's a link to my website. There's more information about my research project there. I'd love for you to check it out. So you always want to leave every situation or elevator pitch with some sort of a connection. Great to meet you. I'd love to follow up with you, something like that. And really, a great elevator pitch is kind of a commercial. Let's think of it as a commercial or even a teaser, like a movie teaser, but about you. And so the idea is that you want to hook your audience with something really informative and exciting, but you also want to leave them wanting more. You want them thinking about your conversation long after you've walked away. Why do you need an elevator pitch? Well, eventually you're going to find yourself in a situation. You'll be at a conference or an event or, a party, if we can imagine a world post-COVID. And somebody's going to come up to you and start a conversation and say, so what do you do? And, you could take an hour to answer that conversation, especially if you work in research and science, but you don't really have that kind of time. And the other part of that is that you want them to fully understand, no matter what their background is, what you do and why it's important. And so you have to have something ready, have to have something short and snappy. And again, it does take really the stress out of these situations, because the truth is that these random meetups and encounters can actually be quite serendipitous. Occasionally, whether it's at an elevator or you're stopped on the street by somebody that you worked with or someone that you've never met, maybe at a senior level, or you're stopped at a red light and you're making conversation, you have no idea who that person is. You have no idea whether maybe they have some connection or may in the future want to, fund your research based on a personal connection. Maybe they have a personal connection to somebody who lives with the condition that you're researching. So you never know what can come out of these encounters. And because of that, it's kind of really important to have these elevator pitches ready. So an elevator pitch should really answer these questions. Who are you? Which problem are you trying to solve? Why does it matter? How are you trying to solve the problem? And what's the benefit if you're successful? Those are a lot of questions to answer, so what you need to do is pare that down to the important parts, but essentially that is the structure of an elevator pitch for a scientist or a researcher. And here's an example that, even this is a little bit on the long side, but it's a great example, and I'll read it to you in just a moment, of how you can break it up too. It doesn't have to be, it shouldn't be sort of like spewing out your elevator pitch. It should seem very organic. It should not seem rehearsed, like you were waiting for that opportunity. So, here's a great example. My name is Heather Sherman, and I'm a scientist working on epilepsy. Specifically, I'm looking into a connection between Mozart's music and its potential to reduce seizures in patients. So the person that you're talking to is probably going to go, huh, that's really interesting. And then that gives you the opportunity to continue on. Epilepsy is actually the most common serious neurological condition in the world. It affects 300,000 Canadians, but up to 30% of them might be resistant to anti-seizure medication, so we need other options. So far, we found that listening to a particular Mozart sonata daily can reduce seizures by up to 50%. Our goal is to expand to a larger trial, and if we're successful, we hope the strategy could be used in conjunction with other therapies to help patients better control their seizures. So again, even this elevator pitch is like slightly on the long side. I would probably break it up, anticipating that's interesting in the middle. But it gives you an example of something that it shows you're introducing yourself, you're talking about what you do, you're talking about why it matters and what the impact is. Epilepsy is something that is, one of the most serious conditions in the world, neurological conditions, and it affects 300,000 Canadians, and 30% of them may not benefit from this medication. So we need this research. Already I'm understanding on the other side of this elevator pitch, what is the impact? Already I'm thinking, yeah, this is a real problem that needs to be addressed. So here's just a quick example of an elevator pitch. Remember, they need to be engaging, conversational, personal, dynamic, short, and most importantly, an elevator pitch should really be persuasive. So you need to focus on the high-level details that are going to leave people thinking about what you're saying long after you go. A quick pro tip or an extra added bit of information or advice is to simplify your message. If you've been following our Krembil coffee breaks from the start, you'll know that this comes up in almost every single webinar that we do, because that's our job in public affairs, is to simplify the message and help researchers and scientists and doctors reach new audience through, simplifying the message, being able to talk to media, to donors, to the public, as well as colleagues and other people in the field. So when it comes to an elevator pitch, simple ways to simplify your message: use analogies. Give visual examples. Talk about Alzheimer's as, a tidal wave. It sometimes can feel kind of kitschy, but if you give people those visual examples or those analogies to help them understand that this is a problem that is just going to snowball in the world, and in 20 years from now, we might be looking at a third of the world's population living with this condition, and so we need to address it through research. Speak in plain language, also another thing that always comes up in our webinars. Lose the scientific jargon. It's really, it depends on your audience, and of course you have to tailor your pitch to different audiences, but speaking in plain language means that you're making it more conversational to whomever you're speaking with. We talked a little bit about focusing on the big picture, but that's really what this is about. I mean, the truth is that depending on your audience, if you're talking to your neighbor or somebody at a dinner party or a potential donor, they may not really be that interested in the step-by-step process of synthesizing a molecule, but they are going to be interested in the fact that you're working on a drug for Alzheimer's. So keep it big picture. Try to really rein in the details as much as possible. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit, about what to pare down and what to keep in. And really the most important thing is don't talk too fast. And that's going to come as a result of practicing your elevator pitch over and over, because when people get nervous, they tend to talk really fast, and that kind of defeats the purpose of reaching out with an elevator pitch. So I just wanted to quickly talk about the best elevator pitch in history. If you Google it, this will come up. Now this is a little bit sort of off topic. This is a photo of Steve Jobs of Apple fame and John Scully. John Scully was the president of Pepsi for many years, I think almost 10 or 15 years. Steve Jobs had it in his mind that he wanted John Scully to come from Pepsi to Apple. And so he spent about a year trying to convince him. every which way. He offered him a lot of money. He offered him a lot of resources and all the freedom that he wanted. And John Scully just kept turning him down because he just saw a future for himself at Pepsi, and he had been there for many years. Until the day, about a year into this relationship, when Steve Jobs said to John, do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water, or do you want a chance to change the world? And with that one sentence, as the story goes, he was hooked, and he came over to Apple and spent about 10 years there. If you know the story from there, it gets a little bit morbid in that their relationship took a turn for the worst. But, you know, the truth is that this was the elevator pitch that made that change happen. And it's always the example that people turn to when you try to think of something persuasive, or an example of something persuasive that really made a change that impacted history. So let's talk about how to write your elevator pitch and how to practice it. Step number one is writing your own story. I mean, it's really hard to come up with an elevator pitch if you don't really understand what your story is or what it's about. So I would suggest this: write it down. Who are you? What do you do? Why do you do it? Very important. Which challenges have you faced? And how have you overcome those challenges? And then you need to find a way to connect the dots. Now, what you're going to end up with, depending on who you are, is probably like a page or two of detail. And from there, that's where you have to pare down, and you have to look at the really important details. For example, it might not be so important to include all the places that you have been educated in your elevator pitch. It's not super relevant to the work that you're doing today. It may not be relevant to talk about all of the studies that you have worked on your entire career. It may be relevant just to talk about your latest research project. And maybe there's a personal connection to you about why you study Parkinson's or stroke or concussion. And if there is that, if you're comfortable, that may be something that you want to weave into an elevator pitch, potentially one of your elevator pitch, because you're probably going to want to make a few different versions. So all things to consider, but best to start with a big long list and then pare down to something that you're comfortable with that is approximately 25 or 30 seconds long. Step number two, practice makes perfect, of course. Now, when I say practice, of course, you've got to practice, you've got to get it down on paper to where you want it to be. I would recommend that once you get the details down, you write them down in point form, not word for word, because it's much harder to memorize when something's word for word. And the other thing is you really have to practice out loud. So it's one thing to talk, you know, to say it in your head. When it comes to an elevator pitch, it's all about the practicing. So once you're comfortable practicing on your own, that's when you try it out on family members, on friends, on even your barber, people in your world that you encounter that you think may be interested or may do you this favor of giving you feedback. And the more that you practice, you'll notice things with your voice. I don't know if anybody else notices this, but if you get nervous, sometimes your voice has a tendency to do lyrical things. So you might start off by talking like this, and then like this, and then you continue your story and it goes like this. So the more that you practice, the more that you, even if you record it and play it back, the more that you'll notice those little details, and you'll be able to work on them. In an elevator pitch, what's most important is to punch the words that matter. So you don't want to be sort of lyrical in your delivery. You want to be deliberate, and you want to punch those words that matter. So I am, you know, I study Parkinson's, and I am super passionate about what I do. I'm really excited to tell you about this new study that we've been working on, you know, that shows the connection between this and this and this. You may want to talk about the fact that, you know, the reason why you do what you do is because you know of the impact that this can have for people living with this condition. We talked earlier in the elevator pitch example about epilepsy. Well, you know, anyone I know that works on epilepsy, whether or not they've ever had a connection personally to it, they know what these people go through when they live with epilepsy. They understand what the lifestyle is like, and they want to help them have a better quality of life. So let that passion and that enthusiasm, let that shine through in an elevator pitch, because that's as important. The way that you deliver the words is actually as important as the words themselves. Step number three is know your audience and tailor your pitch to your audience. So you may be speaking to a senior leader, such as, you know, an executive from the hospital. You may be speaking to someone in your field that you come across at a networking event that you've always wanted to meet and who you admire. You might be speaking to a colleague, and there might be opportunities for collaboration there. Or you may be speaking to a potential donor, to media for an interview, or even friends or family. And so, you know, we talked a little bit about it earlier, but, you know, analogies are always a big help. Talking visually so people can relate and understand and visualize the problem. And if you're talking to a colleague or a senior leader who understands your work in your field, maybe you don't need the analogies, but maybe you need more direct information, or maybe that's where the passion and the enthusiasm is even more important. Really important to always have that ready to go. We talked a little bit about when to deliver your pitch and when not to deliver your pitch. Well, the truth is there's sometimes when it's really not, you know, not honestly not appropriate, but you don't want to walk into a conversation and just launch into your elevator pitch. The best elevator pitches come out organically in conversation, and the best elevator pitches, you know, they don't seem rehearsed. They seem like you know, you're polished, but it's not that you've been waiting for that opportunity. So there's times to deliver your pitch, there's times maybe when not to, but the truth is that when those times come up where, you know, somebody that you've been waiting to speak to for a long time, or someone whom you admire is standing at the elevator by themselves, you've got to seize the moment. You have to seize that opportunity. And that's why practicing your elevator pitch in advance and being ready for it is going to help you in these moments. So I'll just give you a really funny personal example. I was on the shuttle a long time ago, before COVID, and I'm sitting in the second seat on the shuttle, and I'm all settled in with my earbuds, and I'm ready to listen to some music and have a relaxing ride back to the hospital. And Dr. Kevin Smith, CEO of UHN, gets on the shuttle and sits in the first seat. And he's busy, and he's on his phone and you know, answering emails. And I don't say anything for the first few minutes, but I have met Dr. Smith before, and I thought, you know, I'm going to say hello. Everyone else is sort of like whispering in the background, is that Kevin Smith? Is that Kevin Smith? And I thought, you know, I'm going to say hello. So I reach over and I say hello, and we have a very nice conversation. And I thought, you know, I wonder if he's seen the new video that Twain and I have worked on for Krembil. So I asked him if he has a moment, can I show him the video? And it just, you know, it was a 5-minute shuttle ride. And it was just one of those opportunities that, you know, you can easily let something like that slip by, or you can have a nice conversation with someone that you may not have the opportunity to speak to otherwise. So sometimes you'll seize those moments and sometimes you won't. And if you don't, you may kick yourself, and the next time it happens, you'll jump on it. But I think any opportunity to let people know what you're working on and why it's important, and just to introduce yourself and have those opportunities, I say go for it. Step number 5, body language is key. This is really important. You can see from the photos that there's certain body language that is kind of unnerving, and it really puts people off. So the advice is maintain eye contact at all times, smile, and be passionate and excited. Stand up straight, don't slouch. I sound like your mom. Don't cross your arms. You can see here from the photos, you know, the difference in posture makes such a difference in terms of your openness and willingness to have a conversation, or someone's openness and willingness to have a conversation with you. So you want to keep your arms down and have an open and a posture that invites conversation, not something that detracts from conversation. And most importantly, you want to be confident. You don't want to go into this, you know, feeling kind of unsure. You definitely, that's again where the practicing comes in, is that you want to go into it knowing what your goal is. And your goal is to make that introduction and let somebody know what you're working on, because again, you never know what that outcome might be. So I just want to tell you quickly about the Krembil Pitch Perfect competition. It was already a couple of years ago that we held this competition for students, and they were given 3 minutes actually to give pitches. And we put together this really amazing video with some tips on elevator pitches, and Dr. Smith was so generous in his giving us his time. So when I send out the resources for today, I'm going to send you a link to the video, and highly encourage that you take a look at it so that you can kind of get an example of a few more tips that might help you. And we've talked before about Science in the Six, but if we're talking elevator pitches, I think it's also super relevant to remind everyone about Science in the Six. Science in the Six was an event that we put on, sponsored by Krembil, last October. Oh my gosh, it feels like so much longer ago. And so we worked with 7 scientists from throughout UHN to essentially put together a 3-minute elevator pitch, or TED Talk, as we like to call it, about their research. And we taught them how to use storytelling and to deliver their pitch in such a way as to engage and compel and excite people about what they're working on. On our website and also on the UHN website, so on Krembil's YouTube, sorry, not website, on Krembil's YouTube and UHN's YouTube, there's a link to the entire Science in the Six event, which is about an hour and a half long. There are also links to vignette videos for each of the scientists that we put together, which are short, just a quick synopsis of their background and their research. And there's a lot of content and resources there to help you take a look at what an elevator pitch could be and sort of inspire you as you put together your own pitch. So just to close out, just a reminder that the best elevator pitches are engaging, they're personal, they're very conversational, they are short, so you want to keep it ideally to 30 seconds or shorter, and most importantly, they're persuasive. And it's a chance, again, for you to take everything that you are working on, not everything, to take what you're working on and to be able to engage and reach out to other audiences that you may not always have access to. And again, I highly encourage everyone to put together their own elevator pitch. And you can always reach out to Public Affairs, to Twain and I. If you need some feedback, we are happy to give you that feedback. We can't really help you work on it from the outset, but if you put it together and you want to present it to us, we are more than happy to help you with that. And at the bottom of the screen there, you can see our email addresses. So that's it for me. Just wanted to thank everybody again for coming. We've got some time for some questions, and Twain's going to do the weekly draw for a Krembil mug. But I think this is a really important topic, and I'm really glad that you've come today, because I think it's something that is important for everybody to have, and it's not that difficult to put together. It's time consuming in that you need to pare it back, and it's a process, and you may go through many revisions until you get something that you're comfortable with, but once you do, it is definitely going to be worth it.
Yeah, so thank you, Heather. That was wonderful. So just looking at the chat, so we have a question from Michael Reber. He asks, so ideally, we should have a couple of elevator pitches per research project.
Yes, I think that, sorry, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. There, I can see you guys. I think, Michael, you definitely want to have a couple of elevator pitches. I don't know that it's project-based necessarily. It could be. I mean, if you're pitching a donor on a particular project, then absolutely. But most importantly, you want to introduce yourself, high level, what you work on and the impact. So, when we talk about vision, we've talked about some of the stats that you've used in some of your presentations. I think some, you definitely want to include some of those statistics about the impact of low vision and blindness and how you hope to address those with your work. And then if it's particular to a research project, yes, I don't think that you need 5 or 10 elevator pitches. I think you really need 2 or 3, depending on if you're pitching to a colleague or someone in the field, or whether you're pitching to potentially a donor.
Perfect. Thank you, Heather. Is there any more questions? I only see those 2. Otherwise, we can move on to the draw.
Sometimes it takes a few minutes for everybody to put their questions in, so
sure,
we can maybe do the draw.
I'll do the draw then. I've got in this glass bowl all the names. And Heather, where they usually go to, they just contact the Krembil administration office to get their. Okay.
So we're keeping a list of all the winners, and once everybody's back and we've got all of the information, everything, we will make sure that these mugs get to you. I'm loving the candy dish.
Yeah. So that is the winner, I believe, Swati Bajaj. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Congratulations.
Anyways, I apologize.
Yeah.
Can everyone see that? Oh,
I saw that it's Swati.
Okay, Swati Bajaj. So congrats. Yeah,
And she says, wow, thank you. She's
SWATIBAJAJ.
excited.
No problem. We will definitely try and get that mug to you. It's a nice mug. I like it. I kind of flex with it around Krembil walking around the hall. So
here, see, we both have them. Very good collector's items.
Yes.
Amazing. So doesn't look like we have any more questions, which is totally fine. I think this is one of those topics that I'm going to be able to send resources out to everybody. And so there's going to be some links to some examples and some videos. And I think that'll give everyone a really good sense of what a scientific elevator pitch should sound like. But again, I think, we do have a couple more questions, but I think it's one of those things that you've got to write it down, you've got to pare it back, and you've got to practice it. And that's the only way to know when you're going to be comfortable delivering your elevator pitch. So I think there's a couple more questions. Twing, can you see them?
Let me see here. So there's a question, yes, how to choose the first introduction sentence to introduce the topic of your pitch is that first question from Adir.
Okay.
Yeah, so how to choose the first introduction sentences to introduce your topic. What's the best way, I guess, to go about that?
So if we're talking about an elevator pitch, like you run into Kevin Smith at an elevator in Toronto General and you want him to know who you are and what you do, the first couple of sentences are going to be, hi, I'm Adir Malal and I work in, this lab at UHN. I'm sorry, Adir, I don't know which department you're in, but your first line is going to be who you are and what you do. And you're going to try to get another line in there about something that you're working on right now that you want him to know about. So it's different than a 3-minute pitch if you're being asked to present at an event or something like that. And that's a different pitch. That's when you're telling a story. So then your pitch could be, if you're working on Parkinson's, you could tell the story of a fictional patient and or someone in your family and build a story around hooking them about the problem of Parkinson's and why research is so necessary. So in the context of these elevator pitches, which are quick and to the point, your first sentences are always going to be, hi, I'm Adir Malal, and this is what I do.
Perfect. Thanks, Heather. I think that's the only, I don't see any further questions, just a comment, very informative session, actually good reminders and tips from Heidi. So thank you, Heidi.
Well, just a reminder to everybody that that's what these sessions are. I mean, they're short, they're bite-sized, they're coffee breaks, and there's much more information out there about all of these topics, but we just wanted to give you a quick overview. So I'm glad that I'm glad everybody enjoyed it, and I'm happy to make the slides available to anybody who wants them. And again, we will send out probably Monday a list of resources from today so that you can follow up and watch some videos and get some more tips and start working on your elevator pitches.
Yep. Perfect. And next week's session is photographing portraits. So stay tuned for that. I hopefully will have some more of an interactive session, and I know there's going to be lots of questions. So I hopefully you guys can take some of that and start taking portrait photos of your lab mates if they're comfortable, and yourself and whatever it may be. So stay tuned for next week's presentation as well.
Yeah, and Twain takes beautiful portraits. If you haven't seen them,
you can follow me on IG. Krembil social media. I'll put it in here. Hold on.
Yeah, Krembil. And they're, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. They're beautiful photos. So if you're at all interested, definitely tune in next week because you definitely don't want to miss that one. I don't. Anyway, thanks everybody. Thanks for coming today, and thanks for coming weekly. And we really enjoy doing these sessions for you, and just want to wish you a happy weekend, a restful weekend, and be well and healthy. And we'll see you next week. Take care.
Take care, everyone.
And thank you, Twain.
Yeah, no problem.